Welcome to Sib Spot. Today's Reddit stories are from Entitled People. Story 1 is by Sunflower971. Neighbor helped herself to other people's stuff. Several years ago, I heard my sweet neighbor and another woman arguing on the sidewalk. I looked closer and noticed they were both pulling a plant pot in different directions and about to fight. No clue what was up, but I knew my neighbor. If she was arguing, she was right. Me and my husband went over to intervene. My husband wanted to help make peace. Me? I was going to help my neighbor, no questions asked. Why the argument? The other woman was a new neighbor. Our nice neighbor noticed her plant pots were missing and were in the new neighbor's yard. Yep, new neighbor had stolen nice neighbor's plants, pots, and yard decor and decorated her yard with it. My nice neighbor had hand-painted several pots that were in her yard, thus they were easy to identify as hers. We all walked over to the new neighbor's yard to get our other neighbor's stuff back. When we got to the new neighbor's yard, we noticed several things looked both weird and very familiar. Oh, yeah, and the new neighbor had called the cops on us, or at least someone did. Anyway, the new neighbor had planted patches of different types of grass all over the yard and a checkerboard pattern. As well, mismatched shrubs and flowers. I looked at our house a little closer. Yep, we were missing grass patches from the side of the house and one of our shrubs. When the police arrived, the new neighbor was adamant. The plants, pots, grass, shrubs, and yard decor were hers. She informed the cops she dug them up from other yards in the middle of the night and planted them. Yep, she claimed finders keepers. Didn't quite work out. My nice neighbor insisted on pressing charges for petty theft and destruction of property. We just dug up our grass patches and replanted them. Some of them even survived it. Nosy neighbors kept walking by after the new neighbor was arrested. As we were digging up things, we explained why to them. Neighbors kept recognizing their stuff from her yard. One neighbor asked if we'd seen a picnic table, as his was missing. We hadn't thought to check her backyard. Yep, picnic table and a yard full of her finders keepers haul. She moved pretty much right afterward. We didn't miss her. That is a level of crazy that I just can't comprehend. You're new to the neighborhood, you move in and you like somebody's lawn decor, so you just go there in the middle of the night and take it and put it in yours. Not only is it crazy to steal it, but it's crazy to think that you would get away with it and people wouldn't notice over time. You can be quite glad that person's gone, because that's not a stable thing to do. Our next story today is by JECCB, and if I pronounce it, I assume it would be Jekikb. Entitled neighbor decided that my bricks actually belonged to the city, so of course they could just take them. Some things are just hard to fathom. Our house is on a downslope and the front patio sits below the street. Even though we live in a metro area, our streets do not have sidewalks, just the street and a dirt area between the road and our fence. This area between actually belongs to the city, but as is usual, the property owners are required to maintain it. Last summer, I had just decided to give it a small makeover and had pulled up the bricks that had been framing the plant area and stacked them against the fence, while I decided exactly what I was going to do. One evening during this time, my family and I were sitting around our fire table on the front patio enjoying a nice evening. My sons and their significant others had driven over to visit us, and one had parked on the side of the road in front of our fence. We were all sitting around chatting and having a nice time. I was sitting facing the upslope and happened to notice the shape of someone walking by, but between the car and our fence. Now, that's not a big deal. I had just dug up the plants that had been there, but it was a little weird because this is a little tight and there was more room on the street side. I didn't think too much about it until I saw someone do it again. It's not a busy street, so there really was no need to go that way. I thought something was off because they had to deliberately make the choice to take a narrow path instead of the easier one, so I decided to see what was going on. I walked up the stairs and looked at the area between the car and fence. I was stunned to see that almost all the bricks were gone. I looked down the street and there was this young 20-something boy riding away on a bicycle with some of my bricks in his basket. What the heck? I yelled at him and he stopped and looked back. I walked over to him to ask what was going on. Biker EM. Me. Me. What are you doing with my bricks? EM. They were just sitting there, so I thought I would take them. Keep in mind, he had to park his bike and walk between the car and the fence to reach them, and 6 people were sitting 20 feet away, 3 facing his way. Me. Those bricks belong to me. Why would you think you can just take them? That's stealing. EM. I'm not stealing. They were on land owned by the city. Technically true. So they must be free to anyone. Me. No, that's not how it works. It may be city land, but I'm required to maintain it. And even if they were the city's, you would still be stealing the bricks from them. EM. Well, I was told differently, so I just decided I could have them. Me. Stop trying to justify stealing. I need you to take these bricks, on the bike, back to where you got them, and then go get all the others you stole, right now. This conversation was repeated many times as he kept defending his actions, and it took over 10 minutes to convince him he had to return the bricks. He seemed so confused, looking at me with these big sad eyes, like they were just sitting in front of your house, so of course they're not yours, so I can just take them. Why are you accusing me of stealing? For a minute I felt like I kicked a puppy, then I snapped out of it and explained again to him exactly how the land use works, how it's wrong to take anything that doesn't belong to him, and once again demanded the return of all my bricks. I watched him take them off his bike, then ride down the block and gather the rest, 1 load at a time, and restack them in front of the fence. I was steaming. I've never in all my life, 60 plus years, come across a person so ignorant in how the world works. And I gather from what his roommates told him, there are more of them out there that think this way. By the way, it turns out they are college students renting a house. I feel very sorry for their landlord and teachers. They may be on city property. Regardless, if there's something on city property right next to somebody's house or fence, it's common sense and polite to go up to their house and say, hey, you have these bricks out there. Is there any chance that you're giving those away? I noticed they're on city land and I'm interested in having them. If not, I won't take them, but I just thought I'd ask. That's common sense. But it still wouldn't surprise me if there's a shared city property area somewhere that people kind of use as like a method of disposal for things that other people might want to use. Maybe that's why they think that way. This is city property. Things are on it. In the past, it's been that way. I don't fault them for thinking that way, but hopefully he learns it's still polite if it's close to somebody's house or next to somebody's fence to ask at least. Our next story today is by Liam H. Aish. How to get fired by your hairdresser. So, my amazing, beautiful, super cool mother-in-law owns a high-end hair salon and is a very popular and well-respected hairdresser in our large tourist city. As everyone knows, the pandemic was particularly hard on many businesses and especially in the way salons operate in general. When they were finally able to open again for the first time, wearing a mask was the law. Salons that did not follow this law were actively being fined and/or closed. On top of that, my husband was diagnosed with a rare form of lymphoma around the time, which makes him extremely vulnerable to any and all cold, flus, and infections. This is where the real trouble started. Mother-in-law had a longtime client named Janet, but she absolutely refused to put on a mask. My mother-in-law explained to Janet that she had to wear one because it's the law, and she could be fined far more than her styling cost. Janet doubled down, ranting about her rights as an American, blah, blah, blah. Mother-in-law pushed back again with the law and the fines. Still, Janet remained unmoved. Mother-in-law now got as serious as a mom can get. She explained once again that her son has cancer. Janet rolls her eyes. Yeah, I know. I read it on Facebook. Mother-in-law, then you understand that if I get sick, I can't see my son or it could kill him? Janet, so what? Isn't he terminal anyway? Pause for shock while everyone in the salon just freezes for a second. Mother-in-law backs away from the chair. You need to leave. Janet, Pikachu face. What? Why? Hairdresser number 2. Get out! Get out now! Get out before I call the police! And that is how you get fired from your very expensive hairdresser. How anyone can think their freaking bleach blonde hairdo is more important than the hairdresser's child is beyond me. You know that woman has scissors in her hand, right? I'm pretty sure that every illness or disease out there weakens your immune system, but there are some that do it even more so, like people with lupus. And it's terrifying to think that if you go out to get a coffee, your spouse who has lupus could die. Our next story today is by Helpful Hour 1984. Nice office you've got here. Long ago, when I was just getting started in my professional life, I worked for a company where I was sharing an office with several others. I was, among other tasks, the phone receptionist. It was a back-end office, so no need for a receptionist for in-person visitors. As such, I was often on the phone and I started to bother other colleagues. One day I went into the closet to get some supplies and I realized it was full of crap that wasn't really necessary anymore, and that it was completely disorganized. Stuff was just randomly thrown in there, piled up. I realized I could make a perfect one-person office. It even had a small window. So I asked my boss if I could organize it, throw out the garbage and keep only the necessary supplies, and make it into an office for myself. He said yes, but I had to do it on my own time. So I spent 2 afternoons sorting through the stuff. I made a garbage pile, asked everyone to check if they needed anything before tossing it. I put the useful stuff on shelves in my new office, nicely categorized, and moved in. A week later, an entitled colleague comes back from his vacation and notices the change. He decides he shouldn't have to share a much larger office with 3 others while a more junior staff, and a woman at that, gets her own office. So he asks our boss for the office. He says he's often making calls, so he needs it more. He was out of the office half the time, lots of external meetings, and when he was there, he was taking less than half the calls that I was. But yeah, he got the office. I asked my boss for compensation leave for the 2 days of free labor that I had done clearing out the office. He refused, saying that I did get the office. Yeah, for a week, and that he'd never promised it forever. I started looking for other jobs the same day and left soon after. I hope it sticks it to them somehow. It sounds like you were one of the better employees. Like he was more than willing to give you your own office space so you could work. So he obviously thought you were capable of doing the job really well. Our next story today is by The Network is Freld. Recreationally entitled. I was cycling at a local park earlier today. It's a sandy area, so I lower the pressure in the tires to make rolling over obstacles easier. Got back to the parking lot, put the bike on the car rack, pulled out a pump and filled the tires back up to normal pressure. As I disconnected the pump and moved to stow it in the car and drive home, someone clears their throat loudly behind me. I turned around and there was a woman there with a bike with an obvious flat, who said, "You took long enough to finish doing your bike instead of park visitors. Now pump up my tires." I goggled and obviously looked confused because she continued, "Do your job." I was dressed in a khaki green polo shirt and my car is green, and realized that she thought I worked for the park district. I don't work for the park district. This is my car and bike. She didn't believe me and wanted my supervisor's name and demanded again that I fill up her tire. At this point, I was getting annoyed. I do not work here. If you had asked nicely, I might have helped you, but your high-handed BS means I won't. I'm leaving now. I got in the car and started it. She stood behind the car, refusing to let me back out, all the while directing a steady stream of invective at me with surprising variety and volume. Thankfully, a real park ranger heard the noise and walked over. She told him I wasn't doing my job and had refused to help her, and she wanted to report me to the park supervisor. I explained that I was trying to leave and she was blocking me in because she wanted me to fill up her tire after calling me a number of delightful names, including lazy public employee. He looked at me, looked at her, shook his head as if to say, "Again?" and told her he doesn't work for us. He has no obligation to do anything for you, and if that's how you're behaving, I can see why he won't help you. Now please move and let him leave. After a little more discussion, including the ranger telling her that he'd call the local police for some sort of unlawful detainment if she didn't let me go, she moved. As I drove off, she was giving the ranger a piece of her mind at the top of her lungs. Her tire probably remains flat. Bonkers, though, to come up behind somebody who you think is a park ranger and insist that they fill their tires. Even if they were a park ranger, that's not how you ask for somebody to help you. You see somebody doing something, you think they work there. Hey, excuse me, I noticed that you have a pump. I don't know if you work here or not, but I need to fill up my flat tire. I was wondering if I could borrow it for a couple seconds. It's that simple. Instead of demanding, and don't do the throat clearing thing. Just because you're standing there and you clear your throat doesn't mean you're entitled to any sort of acknowledgement from anybody. Ahem. Anyway, our stories for today have come to a close. If you enjoy this content, please click like or subscribe. It helps my channel grow. Until we meet again, have a stunning day.